Pizza and bar tab. Prosecutors reveal what led to the deadly shooting at a Wheaton, Illinois bar. Michael Frund, 49, of Aurora, faces one count of first-degree murder in the killing of Dexter Perkins at Rosie O'Reilly's bar last week. He was denied pretrial release in court. Police were investigating on Friday after a man was shot and killed during an altercation with a fellow customer at a Wheaton bar. Prosecutors have revealed new details behind what they say happened in the moments leading up to a deadly shooting. Michael Freund, 49, of Aurora, faces one count of first-degree murder in the killing of Dexter Perkins at Rosie O'Reilly's. That's a repeat. Sorry about that. The shooting was reported at around 8:45 a.m. Friday at the bar. So, folks, these things don't only happen at dark 30. They often happen at dark 30. But you think you need to prepare to defend yourself at 8:45 a.m. too? Having breakfast? Unfortunately, that's the world we live in. The bar's owners said the argument started over leftover pizza between the victim, a regular, and 3 first-time customers. 1 minute they're hugging, next minute they're arguing, and then the guy went to get his gun, owner John Dwyer said. The argument then spilled out on the front deck where shots were fired. Rosie O'Reilly's owners showed NBC Chicago footage recorded by another bar patron that showed one man pulling out a gun and firing 2 shots in the air. That's the video we're going to see, folks, up to that point. Prosecutors said a brief scuffle ensued on the outside front porch of the bar between Perkins, Freund, and 2 other men. I only see 3 men in the video, which ultimately resulted in Freund pulling out a 9mm Glock handgun from his jacket pocket and firing 2 warning shots into the air. It's further alleged that after Freund fired the warning shots, Perkins approached the other man, at which time Freund, who was standing on the other side of a wooden railing, fired at him, meaning Perkins, striking him in the torso and in the face. It's alleged after the shooting, Freund placed the Glock, which had been fired a total of 11 times, in the center console of his truck, where it was ultimately found by law enforcement. I don't know if Illinois has a 10-round magazine limit. I don't know whether it does. If it does, then this guy emptied his gun, right? 10 plus 1 in the chamber would be 11. He fired 11 times. That also means after the 2 warning shots, 9 more rounds were fired. The distance here is not great. So I expect many of those rounds hit the victim, Perkins, here. Let's see. He was just, a nice guy, owner Teresa Dwyer said. Come in and visit with people. Sometimes there was, teasing back and forth and stuff, but life is life. The Dwyer said the suspected gunman stayed at his pickup truck until police responded to the scene. I've always said this could happen anywhere, anytime, for the smallest of reasons, and this is a prime example. Now let's see. This must be the prosecutor. Dexter Perkins lost his life at liturgy over a dispute regarding pizza and a bar tab. For this senseless act of violence that resulted in the death of an innocent man, Mr. Freund now finds himself facing first-degree murder charges. I offer my sincere condolences to Dexter's family and friends and wish them strength as they are now forced to continue their lives without the love and friendship they enjoyed with Dexter. Okay, so those are the facts as the media are reporting them. Let's go ahead now and take a look at the actual video. Let's see if I can make this bigger.
No.
Okay. Well, it looks like I can't. So we'll have to work with this, folks. All right. So it's less than a minute long. It's always amazing to me how short these videos are, right? The critical use of force event, often it's so quick. In 1 minute, this guy in the back with his arms spread out, he's going to be dead in 51 seconds and maybe a bit over. So the man in the back with his arms spread, that's Perkins. That'll be the victim here. He'll be shot dead. The man with the black cap here, it will be the shooter. And Perkins and this other man, this third man who is not identified, they're going to engage in kind of a bizarre confrontation, like inept wrestling, grabbing each other, dancing for a little bit. And it's not quite friendly, right? It's like faux friendly. So there's antagonism here. Is it something that could quickly turn into fist throwing? Sure. Is it something that could turn into one of these guys drawing a weapon? Sure. We don't see any of that happen because the guy with the gun intervenes first. So here's that video.
No, we're leaving. Let's go. Everyone leave.
Dude, I'm on your side, dude.
I'll pay the bill. There's nothing wrong. Nothing's going on here. Don't do it. Come on. Gentlemen, come on. Come on. Look at you. Look at you. Look at you. Get out of here. Come on. Let's go, gentlemen. PTSD. Hey, come on. Stop, bro. Stop. I got PTSD. Stop, guys. Hey, guys, right now. I'm saying fucking stop.
All right, that's where the video ends. So 2 warning shots into the air. Then he puts the muzzle on them, and presumably shortly afterwards fires the additional 9 rounds out of his Glock. Now, at one point, someone does say, stop, I have PTSD. It's hard for me to tell who that is, whether that's Perkins. It sounds like it might be Perkins. But so this use of deadly defensive force, under what circumstances does Illinois allow for the use of deadly defensive force? Well, I'm glad you asked. It actually abides by the 5 elements of self-defense as we teach them here at Law of Self-Defense. The elements of innocence, imminence, proportionality, avoidance, and reasonableness. So let's take a look at the actual Illinois self-defense statute and see where we find these. Now, Illinois won't tell you we use the 5 elements of self-defense because that's a framework, a conceptual framework for use of force law that we invented here at Law of Self-Defense. But we invented it because we see these elements reflected in every American jurisdiction's use of force law. So should I give a quick summary for those of you who are new, what these elements mean? By the way, you can get this little cheat sheet for free. Just go to lawofselfdefense.com/elements. Do I have a little banner for that? I used to. Right there. lawofselfdefense.com/elements, and it's just a PDF download. So it lists, obviously, the 5 elements, provides a brief description of each. If you don't understand those 5 elements, you can't possibly understand use of force law. So innocence, imminence, proportionality, avoidance, and reasonableness. Innocence meaning you can't have been the initial aggressor in the fight, right? Self-defense is for defenders. It's not for aggressors. Imminence, meaning the threat you're defending yourself against is either actually occurring or immediately about to occur. You're not required to take the beating or the stabbing or the shooting before you can defend yourself. You're allowed to use force to stop an imminent, immediately about to occur attack. Proportionality has to do with the intensity of force involved. You're only allowed to use deadly defensive force if you're facing a deadly force threat. Deadly defense, deadly attack, that's a proportionality. If you're only facing a non-deadly force threat, you're only allowed to use non-deadly force in self-defense. Avoidance has to do with whether you're in one of the 11 states that imposes a legal duty to retreat before you can use deadly force in self-defense. I'll tell you now that Illinois is not one of those states. So for purposes of this analysis, the element of avoidance is off the table in an otherwise lawful case of self-defense. Illinois is a stand your ground state. Doesn't impose that legal duty of avoidance. So that will give us 4 instead of 5 elements for purposes of this analysis. And the 5th of those elements is reasonableness. And reasonableness has 2 facets. One of them is subjective. You have to have held a genuine good faith belief in the need to act in self-defense, as you did. But that good faith belief by itself is not enough. That belief also has to be objectively reasonable, meaning that a hypothetical, reasonable, and prudent person would have shared that subjective belief, that apprehension of harm, that need to act in self-defense. So an irrational or speculative belief in the need to act in self-defense, however genuinely held, fails the objective reasonableness requirement. Now, these elements are cumulative. It's possible that one or more can be legally waived and not required, like avoidance is not going to be required here in the jurisdiction of Illinois. But all the elements that are required, and there's 4 of those here: innocence, imminence, proportionality, and reasonableness. All the required elements are required elements. If any one is missing, that use of force was not lawful self-defense strictly as a technical legal matter. You can't have self-defense if you're missing one of the legal requirements. And the burden of proof on self-defense is on the state. So it's the burden of the prosecution to disprove one of the required elements of self-defense, one or more, but they only need to disprove one. If they can disprove any one of the required elements beyond a reasonable doubt, your claim of self-defense just collapses. It goes away. And that's pretty bad in a self-defense case, because think about what you're doing when you're arguing self-defense. You're not saying it wasn't me, I didn't do it, I was someplace else, I have an alibi. You're saying the opposite of that. You're saying it was me, I shot him, I killed him, but I did it with the legal justification of self-defense. Well, if the prosecutor can effectively eliminate one of the required elements of self-defense, the second half of that statement goes away. There is no self-defense justification. So all that's left of that statement is, I did it, I shot him, I killed him. That's just a confession. And the prosecutor knows this going into a self-defense case. He knows he doesn't have to prove the underlying conduct, because you concede that by claiming self-defense. You can't rationally say, I didn't do it, I wasn't there, but also I did it in self-defense, right? It's incoherent. So by claiming self-defense in the first place, you're conceding effectively to the underlying physical conduct that makes up the criminal charge, in this case, a murder charge, but you're claiming the justification of self-defense. So the prosecutor knows if he can defeat your claim of self-defense, he's got an easy conviction, because what's left is a confession. So that's what a prosecutor is doing. When a prosecutor gets the investigative report from detectives, whether he knows he's doing it or not, what he's doing is looking for any one of the required elements of that self-defense claim to be vulnerable to disproof beyond a reasonable doubt. And if he believes he can do that, you're going to trial. And if he can do that, you're getting convicted. That's how that works. Each of those required elements is a target of attack for the prosecutor. And when we say at Law of Self-Defense that we teach you to be hard to convict with things like our free book, Law of Self-Defense Principles, at lawofselfdefense.com/free book. When we say we teach you to be hard to convict, we're not teaching you legal tricks. We don't teach legal tricks here. We're teaching you what those elements are, what those targets of attack are for a prosecutor. And we're teaching you what you need to know so that you don't inadvertently make yourself vulnerable on one of those elements. Because if the prosecutor looks at that investigative report and he does not find elements that look like they're amenable to disproof beyond a reasonable doubt, well, that's a hard case for him to win. And prosecutors don't like to bring hard cases to trial. They don't like to lose a trial. They like to win, but that's actually an advantage for us, because if we can make it look like our case is hard to win, we become an unattractive target for prosecution. And that's our mission here at Law of Self-Defense. Make you present as hard to convict and as an unattractive target for prosecution. And the less attractive you look as a target for prosecution, the less likely you are to be prosecuted in the first place. And that's our goal for all of you in the Law of Self-Defense community.